Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports live stream, will begin momentarily. This is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports live stream, will begin momentarily. This is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports live stream, will begin momentarily. This is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports, live stream. We'll begin momentarily. This is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports, live stream. We'll begin momentarily. This is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports, live stream. We'll begin momentarily. Live from Princess Grand Hotel in Hanover, Jamaica, this is Conversations on Trafficking, Unmasking the Game, a look at human trafficking in sports. Ladies and gentlemen, may we now invite you to stand for the national anthem. we welcome you officially to the conversation. Hello there and welcome to Conversations on Trafficking. This is an initiative of the Office of the National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, ONRTIP, commemorating World Day Against Trafficking in Persons, which actually was yesterday. So today we are at the beautiful Princess Grand Hotel in Hanover, Jamaica, discussing a topic that is not as beautiful as where we are, in truth. Today we are unmasking the game, looking particularly at human trafficking in sport. It's a phenomenon which is becoming more and more recognized as a trend, and it's now become an area of research and focus to create awareness of what is happening and therefore address this scourge which affects our children and our young people. So today's discussion brings together stakeholders right here in Jamaica. We have some of them in the room. Good morning to you. And then we have folks all across the world via stream. We say hello to you wherever you're watching. As far away as South Africa, we have folks from Switzerland who have done groundbreaking global research and have research-based insights and recommendations as to what we can do about what's happening and the way forward. We are all too aware of the value of this very important event and also of this very important conversation convened by our very own National Rapporteur, Mrs. Diane Gordon-Harrison, who has been and continues to work tirelessly in her capacity to highlight what's happening in our Jamaican context. So what you hear today, it might surprise you, or it may not, I don't know, but it certainly will educate us as to what is going on and the role that we all play in trying to address what we know is happening. Before we get into the actual conversation in trafficking, though, we welcome our National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, Mrs. Diane Gordon-Harrison, to welcome us and provide her opening remarks. First, though, a little bit more about her by way of this introduction. Mrs. Diane Gordon-Harrison is Jamaica's children's advocate and National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons, the first to hold this position in the Latin American and Caribbean region, and an attorney at law by profession. Her current roles provide a platform from which she promotes the rights of children and vulnerable people from a victim-centered and rights-based orientation. She is passionate about accountability frameworks through which persons violating the rights of children and vulnerable persons can be held responsible for their actions. She's an associate tutor at the Norman Manley Law School, certified to the Geneva-based Justice Rapid Response roster of global experts in international criminal law, and a serving member of the board of the International Society for the Prevention of Child Abuse and Neglect. And so may we have a round of applause to welcome Mrs. Gordon-Harrison with us this morning and to congratulate you on the great work you're doing. Also our children's advocate, many of us know, so she is working to help our children in different capacities. Diane, it's good to see you this morning. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for doing this. You know, a lot of us think about this topic and many people do not know that it's happening. I mean, in Jamaica, but even worldwide, it's a kind of like a burgeoning area of research. So let's set the context high level and talk a little bit about our Jamaican context and how well placed ONRTIP is to start to create awareness and even to spur Caribbean discussion and dialogue on what's happening here.
All right, I will. So thank you, Simone, for the introduction. And you will forgive me if, because of the stickler that I am for protocol, I'm going to pause to recognize some persons in the room and just to welcome everybody, not only to this beautiful resort, but of course, particularly importantly, to this very significant discussion today. So of course, I'd like to recognize Senator Kevin Gale. Good to have you. We have also Mr. Michael Morgan, Chief Technical Director from the Ministry of National Security. We have Mrs. Jody and James Adams, I believe. She is representing Mrs. Jennifer Griffiths, who is the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Tourism. Mr. Richard Troop from the Ministry of, let's get this right, Education, Education, Skills, Youth and Information, representing Dr. Kassan Troop, the Permanent Secretary in that ministry. We also have Mr. Andre Wilshire, who is Senior Director and representing Mr. Errol Green Bright. And in fact, I'd like to say everyone who has been invited and everyone who has worked behind the scenes, including my team from the Office of the National Rapporteur on Trafficking in Persons and the OCA, because we have to pull on each other's support for just the yeoman service that they continue to provide behind the scenes.
I think that deserves a round of applause. We can big them up for that. Little team, but a Talawa team,
yes,
as we would say.
Little and mighty. So welcome, and I really, really thank you for being a part of this very important discussion. Yes, could you remind me of the question?
Yes, so let's talk high level now and talk about our Jamaican context. So what's happening here as we position it and how we can create awareness with what's going on in Jamaica, your office through ONRTIP, and how we can spur dialogue even within the region to bring awareness to what's going on.
All right, so I think I'll answer that by referencing the rationale. Why this discussion, why now, and why the Office of the National Rapporteur? So Jamaica continues to make very significant strides in our anti-human trafficking efforts. We have not only my office, but we also have the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Persons and a number of organizations that work on that task force. I see CTD Morgan is here, and he can tell you about the work that the 25 organizations that comprise NATFATIP do all the time. But in 2015, our cabinet of Jamaica, that's the executive arm of government, said, we want to make Jamaica that much more credible. So we're not just doing, but we're measuring. And so the concept of having a national rapporteur was born. And in 2015, I was appointed as Jamaica's national rapporteur on human trafficking, which really has the responsibility to say where we're at. What are we doing right? So we need to scale up those interventions. What could we be doing better? So there needs to be some sort of recommendations to help us plug whatever gaps there may be, but also very important to keep us on the cutting edge. What's happening in trafficking globally? What are the risks that could therefore manifest for us in Jamaica? And having identified those risks, what are the strategies that we can employ to really cauterize them before they become too explosive?
If I am not mistaken, your appointment had a bit of history behind it, did it not?
Yes, it did.
Can you share that?
It did. So I still remain the only rapporteur throughout the Caribbean region. And again, I think it cements Jamaica as a leader in this area. And we have been recognized as such. But equally important is the need to work collaboratively with the rest of the Caribbean. And so we hosted with our partners, Free the Slaves, not last year, but the year before, a regional Caribbean forum on human trafficking. And one of the actions that we've taken forward from that is to create a Caribbean coalition against trafficking in persons, which I have the honor of serving now as the chair of that regional body. So again, to me, it cements a willingness within the region to do what we need to do collaboratively and effectively to advance the agenda.
All right, we want to talk a little bit more about human trafficking generally, just to get an idea of what it is, and then bring it down to the level of sport. But first we have a depiction to kind of let us know, what it is that we're talking about in a more visible way. We can't do that. Or we could, but we didn't prepare. So we're going to invite some folks who are able to do this for us. Let's make welcome the Children First Agency's Bashi Bus crew with their depiction, and then we're going to jump right into the meat of the matter with the actual conversation. So, Diane, if we could go this way, we'll invite the Bashi Bus crew to come and do their thing.
Yeah. Money, yeah. Johnny Superstar Live. Yeah. So what you know, I'm here to confirm that all is well. Because my recruiter just tell me, say, I'm going overseas next week to the big city to make some big money. Send to what? Send to Lion, yeah. Giant Live, yeah. Hold on, Sarah.
Girl!
Sarah, come. Later.
What is wrong with you?
Sorry, sir.
How much time I must tell you? You know, me not tell you. What you do wrong? What you do wrong?
1 foot.
Shamar?
Yes, sir.
Crocs?
Sports mode, sir.
Oi, 10 push-ups. Take this thing for a joke. Tia, let me tell you something. Stop playing with me here.
Sorry, sir. I was just a little tired.
Oh, tired? Kayla, please remember that later you have the little special activity. And you can't be too late for that. You hear me?
Yes, sir.
So, Tia, how me here say your visa depend on it? What's that talk about?
None of your business.
None of my business is right. Because remember, I see you and Sir last week in a car cock up well comfortable.
No, man. You're my boss. You can't talk, sir.
Tia, watch you now. Let me ask you one next question. This scholarship thing where you did get, it never work out. That never work out long time.
It did, but mommy never have the money, so sir sort out the visa, and he said I could stay with a friend of his until we work out something.
All right, okay.
But what about your track thing?
You know, me not really do the track thing no more because coach promised me say this year is my year because he made me the captain. And I say when we go overseas next week, yeah man, I use the opportunity to make some money because it's a good opportunity. Me have to make use of it.
All right, just be careful because not all that glitters is gold.
Yeah, you deal with you, me deal with me.
Cool. Worries in the dance, worries tonight. And so the story unfolds of promises and lies told to those too naive or perhaps desperation, ambition, a need to be better, to make mommies, but instead a play on their vulnerability. When will it end? Yes, when will it end?
Will it end? Can I speak directly to our sports association members, our teachers, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Wellness, Ministry of Education? Listen to us. The see and blind, hear and deaf thing cannot work. We are speaking to you to ask you to look out for those red card behaviors. Yeah? We are talking because we want to see a change. Listen to me now, man. You please take your roles and your responsibilities seriously, especially as you are assisting our young persons to access new opportunities.
Support us as athletes. Keep us informed. Lend a helping hand.
Better yet, ensure there are proper regulations in place
to prevent violation and exploitation.
We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying. We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying.
Empty promises,
Dreams gone astray. Too many you've been led away. The misuse, abuse far too prevalent. So action, no, we can't stay silent.
Prevention and justice must take their place. Expose the traffic and show them face. Yes, this is not a joke thing. So open your eyes, expose everything. We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying. We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying.
see the youths, them a star.
Them a star.
Them a depend for we figure far. So guide their dreams, don't betray the trust.
And if you see anything that looks suspicious,
We have a duty to report. Take trafficking out our sports.
Prevention, suppression, and punishment. They deserve much better, make it make sense.
We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying. We ending human trafficking. Let's start the unmasking. We ending human trafficking. Time for action, no delaying.
All right. Round of applause for the Children First Agency's Bashi Bus crew. I think Mrs. Gordon Harrison just got a jingle in there somewhere that she can use. All right, folks. So now, having set the tone, we can actually get into the conversation. So Diane is here with us. We've got two ladies who we're going to join online in just a bit, Mrs. Lorena Bright and also Dr. Monique Esmer. I'll tell you about them closer to the time, but they're in the wings waiting and standing by. Diane, we know what we just saw, so that has set the tone for our discussion. High level now, let's talk about human trafficking and rationale and why we're looking at this, and then we can zero in on what's happening in sport.
Right. So absolutely. So with human trafficking, one of the best strategies to prevent it is to build awareness. And so this forum, which is really taking place in the midst of Human Trafficking Week in Jamaica, is really to bring attention to not just human trafficking, but specifically sports trafficking. And just for those persons who may not yet be too familiar with the legal definition and the framework, within Jamaica we have our anti-trafficking law. So it's the Trafficking in Persons Prevention, Suppression, and Punishment Act of 2007, and that provides a legal framework for anyone who recruits somebody, harbors somebody, transports somebody, receives somebody, or transfers them for the purpose of exploitation. And so human trafficking is really about exploiting others for your own benefit or gain, whether that's cash or kind. And we thought this is a beautiful definition. It accords with the Palermo Protocol, which is the UN document, if you will, that guides how human trafficking should be dealt with. But there is an emerging trend, and Jamaica is well placed to be exploited if we're not careful.
Because we are a sporting nation.
Exactly.
Right.
We are sports. We have the athletes, we have the coaches, we have the fans, and we have very demanding fans who want the best all the time, and we're always urging for athletes to get to the next level. So the question is, why not? Because we see the potential for the risk and the vulnerability.
Okay, so tell us what we see emerging in Jamaica, because some people would tell you, that's not happening here.
Yes,
We
okay.
see it happening here?
Yes, so I'm not going to steal Monique or Lorena's thunder, because they're going to talk about a global thematic report on sports trafficking that was released last year. And that really looks at how trafficking can happen in sports, around sports, and through sports. And, you know, when I think, for example, of a particular case that we have prosecuted here in Jamaica, which has all of the different characteristics of a sports trafficking case, but could not have been prosecuted as such because we don't have that yet in our legislative framework, it says that we need to start the dialogue urgently. And the case I reference is one from 2017. There was want our children to excel, you know? And so the parents said, absolutely. And he took these boys, but instead of having football training, what he did was he gave them sheets that they had to go to the stoplights over different weekends and seek sponsorship from motorists who would stop, you know, they explain, oh, we're going on football, we need to raise money and so on for our gear and plane fare and so on. And so he had these youngsters out in the sun begging, and getting money, mind you. And then he repeated the act on a following weekend. And there was one mother, thank God for the curious mother, who, when her 12-year-old returned much later than anticipated based on the original plan, she said something is wrong. And when she asked her son, you know, where are you coming from? How football camp went so late? He told his mom what happened. And so that human trafficking set of circumstances were uncovered. And thankfully, there was a prosecution, but it was prosecuted as a forced begging case where the boys were clearly being exploited and he was getting the funds. And the funny thing is, because there was perhaps no explicit focus on how these athletes or prospective athletes were violated, there was no restitution ordered. So he was convicted in 2018. He pleaded guilty to 11 counts of forced begging, and he was sentenced to 2 years in prison. And what is instructive is that when the school was contacted that he said he was recruiting boys for, the school leadership said, absolutely not. We have no idea who this man is and what he's doing. And when you think of what sports trafficking is, that would fall squarely within it. Because just to encapsulate for our viewers online and the persons in attendance, you can have trafficking in sports. So you are luring athletes or prospective athletes who have a big dream that you're going to get a big contract. Or in the Jamaican context, we don't have big contracts to give you, but you're going to get recognition. You are going to be on that 4x1 team at champs, you know. You are going to be the next big thing at assembly when you go and you win and you run your heart out. So you have the fake promises and then the exploitation happens. That's trafficking in sports. Then you have trafficking through sports, where sports is used as the cover, and then you have other forms of trafficking taking place. And then you have trafficking around sports, and this happens when there is a big sporting event. So think back to 2007 when we had the ICC Cricket World Cup. And so massive droves of people who were parts of teams and management and so on were coming into the country. And what we have seen in other areas of the world where you have the Olympics, World Cup, World Games and all of that, is that on the periphery, with all of these persons coming in, there is a heightened risk for vulnerable populations, teenage girls who are just hanging out by the hotel because the players are coming back and so on, and one thing leads to another. And so these are some of the risks that are very clear and present.
Incredible. And I hope all of us, as Diane speaks, are thinking about, how this manifests, because you may know somebody somewhere who is experiencing this, and a whistle needs to be blown. We also have stakeholders in the room who are heavily involved with sport. Later on, we want to hear your thoughts and your feedback on what we're talking about today. But as we dive even more deeply into the conversation, I want to introduce you to two ladies who are going to be very, very pivotal to what we're talking about today, because they have led research in this area that no doubt will benefit Jamaica and the rest of the region as we try to do something about what we see emerging. Let me introduce you to Mrs. Lorena Bright, Executive Director of Mission 89 in Geneva, Switzerland, and Dr. Monique Esmer, Senior Lecturer, International and Public Affairs at the University of KwaZulu-Natal, all the way in South Africa. Let's introduce you to them a little more now. Our first guest, Lorena Bright, has established herself as a distinguished figure in international sport administration, combining expertise in sports governance with a profound commitment to protecting vulnerable athletes. As the founder and executive director of Mission 89, established in 2017, she leads a Geneva-based organization dedicated to combating child trafficking in sport through research, education, and advocacy. Her impressive career spans several prestigious roles in international sport. As head of international affairs and president's office at CONCACAF in the Cayman Islands, she strengthened the Confederation's position within global football through innovative initiatives such as the Stakeholder Management Platform. Currently, Bright serves on several prestigious committees, including the Safe Sport Commission of the Council of Europe and the Integrity and Sustainability Commissions of the World Baseball Softball Confederation. Holding dual nationality from Sierra Leone and the USA, she brings a global perspective to her work in protecting young athletes from exploitation. Our second guest, Dr. Monique Emser, is a specialist in human trafficking and counter-trafficking governance with over 15 years of experience. Her research focuses on complex and emerging forms of trafficking, including the nexus between sport and trafficking. Dr. Emser contributed to Mission 89's global thematic report on sport trafficking. Dr. Emser serves on the G100 Women's Anti-Human Trafficking Wing for South Africa. She's a member of several South African anti-trafficking bodies, including the KwaZulu-Natal TIP Task Team and National Freedom Network. She's a member of several South African anti-trafficking bodies, including the KwaZulu-Natal TIP Task Team and National Freedom Network. Applause for both ladies, please. They're far away, but they can feel our love from right here in the room. Ladies, you're waving to us and we are waving back. It's good to have you here with us this morning, particularly because we know you are so pivotal to the issue about which we speak. Our national rapporteur has set our Jamaican context for us, but I know she's... Di, tell me why these two ladies are so important to this discussion, and then we will speak directly with them.
Well, I think the proof of the pudding is in the eating. These two ladies are dynamic. They are well read and researched on this issue, but perhaps most of all, they're passionate and they don't hesitate.
Yes.
I think it was one conversation and we're like, yes, let's do this. So that's why these two ladies.
Excellent. So Dr. Esma, I'm going to start with you. Hi there, Lorena. Good to have you here as well. Let me start with you, Doc. Tell me how this global thematic report was conceptualized. Why did we decide that this was the time to do it? 2024 report? Talk to me about the catalyst.
So essentially, the Global Thematic Report on Sport Trafficking was conceptualized in response to a growing but largely invisible crisis in the intersection of sport and human trafficking. Because, for years we've seen anecdotal evidence and isolated cases which have suggested really a disturbing undercurrent of exploitation within the world of sport. But there's always been this critical lack of conceptual clarity, empirical data, and coordinated international responses. And as a result of which, this entire issue has been under-theorized, under-researched, and most critically, for all of us, under-regulated. And that's why Mission 89, from their work on the ground and at policy levels, saw a pressing need to elevate the issue of sport trafficking to the international human rights and anti-trafficking agenda. Because what was lacking was not only comprehensive evidence, but also conceptual language that could actually help us differentiate and categorize the diverse forms of exploitation that Diane has already referenced for us, namely within, through, and around sport. And as a result of this, the report was conceived in this context with two key objectives in mind. The first was to develop a globally relevant conceptual framework that accurately captures the multidimensional nature of sport trafficking. And secondly, to produce a research-based thematic report that draws on a wide range of sources to provide actionable insights for both policy, regulation, and of course, prevention. And rather than focusing on one single sport or country or demographic, the report aims to map the global ecosystem in which forms of trafficking occur. And in doing so, it really provides the great groundwork for a more coordinated and international response that includes the exploitation of athletes and in particular minors, not as isolated incidents, but as part of a systemic problem with clear vulnerabilities, enabling factors, and identifiable actors.
All right, so we want to talk a little bit about the methodology you used in conducting the research, and we want to get to key findings and the highlights of the report. But it's often said that if you can't name something, then you can't really properly address it. And so you and your team worked hard to put a definition to sports trafficking, and I think we have that. I would love to put that up on screen so folks can see how you broke it down. It's a very, very detailed definition. Said sport trafficking is the act of recruiting, transporting, transferring, harboring, or receiving an individual, typically an athlete or aspiring athlete, within or across borders through coercive, deceptive, or abusive means for the purpose of exploitation in, through, and around sports. Exploitation may manifest as coerced labor, sexual exploitation, slavery, servitude within sport-related events, and in the case of children, no means needs to be presented. How difficult, or maybe how easy was it for you to come up with that description, to name it, so we can shame it?
So this definition closely aligns with that of the Palmyra Protocol. But in order to get to it, we obviously had to undertake a lot of research, looking at doctrinal, legal aspects and analysis, looking at the field work, looking at available data, case studies, which will form part of our methodology. But when we look at the definition in and of itself, in terms of its alignment, it's so much more than that, because really what we do is that we break it down into three subsets. In other words, a three-part conceptual framework that I'd really like to actually describe and talk to you a little bit more, because we really need to unpack this definition due to its complexity and how it actually plays out. So when we're looking at this particular definition and its three parts, the first of which is trafficking in sport, it becomes important to us to realize that we're talking about trafficking that occurs within both the formal and informal structures of sport itself. And this includes situations where children or athletes are recruited to play for a club or academy, but are then subjected to exploitative conditions such as forced labor, denial of education, abusive training practices, or even sexual exploitation. And one of the biggest issues that we see when it's linked to this in terms of the deceptive means that are used is that they are often framed as training opportunities, but there may be a lack of legal contracts, oversight, or safeguarding. Or even where there are contracts, athletes may even be forced to sign over a bulk of their future earnings. And often there's a lot of coercion, there's a lot of blackmailing going on, particularly within trafficking within sports, where opportunities to compete competitively, internationally, for the national team, for example, are held above victims' heads in order to exploit them, whether for forced labor or even for sexual exploitation. And we've actually seen, in terms of the report itself, in terms of the case studies that we looked at and analyzed, that cases of in sport have been documented across multiple continents and sporting disciplines, with patterns most frequently emerging in football, but also increasingly in athletics, baseball, basketball, martial arts, and a whole host of other sports where we actually have to pay close attention to as well. The second part of this conceptualization that we see that sometimes becomes a bit more complex, because it's when we start to look in terms of what's happening within sport itself, we can clearly recognize that if we're actually looking for it. Where it becomes a little bit more murky, and this conceptualization is incredibly important for us, is trafficking through sport. And this is where we see that sport is being used as a false pretext or deceptive recruitment mechanism, but the actual exploitation occurs outside the sporting context. And individuals, more often than not, they typically are minors, but sometimes also some young adults, are promised sports scholarships, trials, or contracts abroad, but upon arrival, they are exploited outside the sporting context, and this may be in domestic work, the sex industry, informal labor markets. We've seen cases in all of those areas. And what we see in this particular subset of sport trafficking is that the initial promise of sport is merely the bait that is used by traffickers to lure their victims. And this type of trafficking is actually particularly insidious because it exploits the hope and ambition of aspiring athletes who view sport as a legitimate pathway to economic security, education, or social mobility. And when we look at this particular complex form, it also typically unfolds in two interlinked pathways, the first of which where victims are recruited by unlicensed or fraudulent agents, coaches, or talent scouts who promise access to overseas clubs, scholarships, or trials. And in return, families are pressured to pay large fees. And sometimes this also covers fake visa applications, travel, accommodation, and agencies. And in many cases, families also have to look to external actors, loan sharks even, members of the community to take out loans to pay for their children for these trials, really pushing them sometimes into debt themselves. And this adds another layer of pressure and complexity on the victims themselves. And what we see is that once money changes hands, the recruiter may provide, in some cases, not all, fraudulent documentation, or in many instances, abandoning their victims upon arrival in a foreign country, often without any legal status, support network, or real opportunity. And in some cases, the promised opportunity simply doesn't exist at all, and victims may be left stranded in transit countries or at the destination with no means of subsistence. And this is where things become particularly worrisome, because without documentation or access to legal employment, they are at high risk of being re-trafficked.
Right.
And at risk of further exploitation. So this is why the second subset as well also plays a particular important role in terms of understanding what we're looking at here, because this is also where we see that victims may be recruited into criminal networks, into exploitative labor, sex trafficking, and we often also see organized crime part and parcel of this particular form of trafficking. So it's something that we also need a lot more sensitization to. And the third part that also emanates from this, it's not just aspiring athletes, but those who are fans, who love sport. And this is where trafficking around sport becomes also another problematic subcategory that we also need to be aware of, which is also quite distinct because it involves the broader economic and social environment of sport, especially around mega sporting events. And so we see in the construction of stadiums, services to tourists, or engagement in informal economies that thrive around such events, whether they are the World Cup, Olympics, and so forth. This again offers opportunities for exploitation of vulnerable individuals. So it's looking at those different categorizations which we unpack within the report itself, and we use different case studies, particularly regional case studies, examples, and analysis to actually flesh this out and bring this to life and highlight those specific sectors and actors and vulnerabilities, while identifying key regulatory and enforcement gaps that really allow these practices to persist.
Yeah, multi-layered. Reminding everybody this is a conversation. So Lorena is standing by. I'm going to come to you shortly, but Diane, if there's anything in there that you want to jump in, let's talk about it. When you read the research, is there anything that jumped out of you, particularly in our case?
Just how related it was and relevant to our context. Just listening to Monique just now, she mentioned that this kind of exploitation doesn't just arise in formal sporting contexts. If you, as Jamaicans, recall going to the country on a weekend, on almost every corner there's a six-a-side football match going on, or there are community matches that are organized, and you have persons who are dreaming that they're the next big baller. All it takes is for someone to see that and to try to tap into that and exploit it. Certainly from the position, a ride home, or we can go to dinner, and then situations more from there. So it's very relevant. And so that perhaps was what struck me so greatly, because this is a threat that is hiding in plain sight within our Jamaican context.
And hiding in plain sight, according to Doc, all across the world. So it's good that we're talking about it now, and that the research was done to kind of pull the case studies together so we can know this is not anomalous, it's not unique to anybody. And if we pull together, we can, you know, try to do something about it. Is there anything that jumped out of you in terms of the findings, key findings, highlights, Dr. Amsar, before we head over to Lorena and talk about some of the patterns that were observed in the findings?
So just briefly, I would say essentially some of the most significant findings from the report itself is just how deeply unrecognized and unreported this form of exploitation is.
Unrecognized and unimportant, you said?
No, underreported.
Underreported, yes.
Underreported, sorry, if there's a bit of an echo. And I think this is why this event is incredibly important and fantastic that we're having this conversation today, that we're sensitizing ourselves and key actors and stakeholders about the realities of sport trafficking. Because the real reason here is what we've seen is that more often than not, sport trafficking falls through the cracks of anti-trafficking frameworks because it doesn't fit neatly into conventional categories. And another problem is many of the victims, also in part due to the age, do not always realize that they've been trafficked because the recruitment process mimics legitimate sports migration or training opportunities. And for us, children and adolescents are the most affected. Wherever we look, they are the most vulnerable when we're talking about sport trafficking, and they deserve special attention and care. And also as a result of this, we see, particularly in lower income communities, for example, where families invest heavily to support their children and their sporting dream, this in turn, it's an unintentional consequence, but it sometimes also makes those children highly vulnerable to deception because they're really trying to strive for that dream. Their hopes of social mobility, of success, are being preyed upon by these exploiters who really seek out, to target such vulnerable individuals from these particular communities as well. And we also need to be aware of the lack of regulation in terms of player agents, recruiters, fake sports academies. These all play significant roles in perpetuating trafficking, because in many cases, intermediaries operate across borders or even within the states themselves. They are unregulated and they exploit legal loopholes. And particularly where we're seeing global sports, like in the case of football or in basketball and baseball and so forth, where there is migration often taking place, or even athletics, we see that they exploit these legal loopholes and sports governance systems. So we really need to start coordinating with one another to close many of these gaps. As we found out, with this commercialization and globalization of sport, it's really created a demand for talent that traffickers exploit. And so many lives and so many opportunities and so much talent has been lost along the way. So really, when I say about this, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that there's a major gap in oversight and regulation, both from a national perspective where countries do not monitor or license sports academies, but also from a sporting regulatory aspect in those governance systems. And we really need to shift that in terms of coordinating our responses, both at national and international levels, and also providing victims of sport trafficking better legal and legal redress in terms of the crimes that have been perpetrated against them, and also sometimes the stigma that is attached to them and the lack of support services. These are all things that emerge from that. Victims aren't always believed either, unfortunately, also in the case of sport trafficking. So what really, for me, which comes out of this report, is a call for a paradigm shift to treat sport not only as a pathway to opportunity, but also as a potential site of exploitation that requires active safeguarding, ethical recruitment, and international cooperation.
Thank you for that. Underreported, underrecognized, because largely we don't know, again, why the conversation is so important. Lorena, let me come to you and talk a little bit about the patterns that you observed. I mean, some highlighted by Dr. Esma as the key takeaways. Let's talk a little bit about some of the patterns that you observed in the findings. And then Doc alluded to some of the agencies and stakeholders that can help in terms of international and national and international. I think we need to look even at community, right, and start there and build out. But Lorena, let me come over to you and get your thoughts so far on what we've been discussing, and then you can talk to me a little bit about what are some of the overarching patterns that you found in the research. Lorena there?
Yes, I am.
Yes. Did you hear my question, or do I need to repeat?
If you can repeat it just one more time, because I think I just arrived as you.
Okay. Welcome. You arrived right on time. We're looking at some of the overarching patterns that you found in the findings, and then we want to move to Dr. Emsa's point a little bit about who the key players are in trying to address some of what we see. So let's start with the patterns first.
Well, I mean, building off, you know, the overview that Dr. Emser gave, and, you know, I can focus on what some of these discoveries mean in practice. But I would first like to start with the obvious, which is some of Jamaica's distinctive strengths, as I see it, or we see it, which is the fact that, you know, Jamaica has this sporting heritage with, you know, the track record of producing world-class athletes, and there's, as far as I know, you know, strong sport federations with a coaching system that's obviously developing this talent. You know, the country also is a regional influence, you know, has a lot of regional influence and a natural leadership role, I would say, in the sporting environment in the Caribbean. But in terms of patterns, we can divide them or subcategorize them into two when it comes to global findings. One would be the geographic vulnerabilities. The other would be the age and gender patterns, and then also some of the sport-specific risks, right? So, you know, Jamaica is particularly vulnerable due to its proximity to major sporting markets such as the US, and you see that also between Africa and Europe. It's also an island nation with particular challenges. Youth unemployment is likely one, and you know, and there's a lot of I imagine family pressure for economic advancement by youth. I think that was you know, on youth, that was alluded to in the skit earlier. There's also a pattern of young athletes being recruited with promises of scholarships, professional opportunities that we see across other countries that are, you know, I would say the global south or developing countries. Then, you know, there's the age and gender pattern. The peak vulnerability across continents is between 14 and 18, even though the studies show that it's getting younger and younger, and it depends obviously on the sport as well. You know, female athletes facing additional vulnerabilities. Women's football is the fastest growing sport in the world, so we imagine that there will be, you know, even greater vulnerabilities there, as well as the sport becomes professionalized, increasingly commercialized as well. And then there's the family economic pressures, you know, which sometimes can override even the best of our protective instincts. So those are two key patterns, and there are also the sport-specific risks. Track and field, football, you know, basketball. I know that basketball will not be one of your key sports, but cricket, you know, these are particularly relevant to the Caribbean context. And obviously there's also individual sports versus team sports, and there are different exploitation patterns as well. As well as you have across, you know, across the continent when it comes to youth academies. and training camps and traffickers and fake agents basically, focusing on these particular establishments. That seems to happen a lot also in the global south, in developing countries, and so those are the three key patterns we would have seen.
Okay.
There aren't any specific cases from Jamaica. I have to say that that wasn't one of the case studies from the Caribbean. I believe it was Cuba and baseball smuggling.
Oh, that's interesting.
Eventually, the smugglers, once they learn about the value of the individuals that they're smuggling, then they soon become traffickers.
That's interesting. That's actually surprising to me. I would have thought perhaps it would have been us, Diane, because of how rife we are with talents, with track and field in particular, football in particular, the two sports Lorena mentioned. I was surprised to see it would have been Cuba. It would have been a radar. But is that good for us? Does that mean that,
No, sorry, just to interject there. Cuba is baseball.
Yes, I know.
Yes.
I know.
Okay.
But
okay.
Yes, I heard what you said, Lorena. I was saying that it was curious to me that would have been Cuba with baseball and at Jamaica with track and field, given just globally how well placed and well known brand Jamaica is in sport. And so does that give us time to try and get ahead of this, or?
Not necessarily,
Okay.
because the nature of human trafficking is that it's often hidden, right?
Gotcha.
And without saying anything, it was perhaps serendipity, because this morning, as I was preparing to come, I opened my mailbox because M&S had me at a forum all day yesterday, and there was a very urgent email highlighting what really could be a case of sports trafficking right here. So it's not that it's perhaps not happening, it's just that it's hidden.
That's right.
And that's the
Or
threat.
that people don't know, which is why the conversation is so important. So Lorena, I'm coming back to you to talk about some of the steps that we can take now, knowing what we know and what the research has yielded in terms of information. Whose responsibility is this now to try and get this thing looked at with a view to creating change? We talk about national and international, but I think we need to go even lower level and grassroots, get to community and key players in terms of, just individuals who wield influence and power and can move the needle. Your thoughts?
So, just going back, if I may, on not having cases, I think one of the breakthroughs that we have made, having now come up with a working definition, a policy definition on sport trafficking, is that now people can be identified as having been sport trafficked, essentially, which wasn't a possibility before. And everybody usually asks us about data, where's the data and where's the evidence? And, I always tell them that when we organize youth workshops or youth forums, particularly in Africa, or specifically maybe West Africa, or actually wherever, we've done so also in the UK with some academies. Once young people understand the definition of trafficking, what trafficking looks like, almost every one of them, well, obviously not every, but in every one of those sessions, there have been hands that went up when we asked at the end of that session, how many people know someone that this has happened to? So at the beginning, when we always start, who knows, do you know anything about human trafficking? No. But at the end of it, once they understand what it is,
there you go.
Hands go up. So I think we will now have an increase in reporting, and so we can very well imagine that those those numbers will go up, and soon we will be able to carry out that qualitative research that the world seems to be waiting for. So in terms of steps to take, at the local community level, the buck starts, I believe, with parents. Parents need to be better educated. coaches, the local club officials, religious leaders, people that are well respected within the community need to start being part of the solution at a community level.
Absolutely. What about big comms like radio and social media and awareness campaigns? How do those play a role?
Well, I was looking up a little bit yesterday on doing some background research, and I know that radio is still a very important medium of communication in Jamaica and the Caribbean. And so that's, those are the channels that need to be used. And perhaps a public awareness campaign. We just launched the Line We Don't Cross yesterday, and it's a multi-stakeholder campaign, and we're hoping to bring on athletes as well as sport federations, as well as corporates that are involved in sport, as well as countries, member states or government agencies, because this is a multi-stakeholder solution.
Absolutely.
Right? And yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so as you speak to that now, I want to turn it back to Jamaica. This report has obviously been game-changing and groundbreaking for us. And you talk, Diane, about exploitation patterns that you see emerging. You mentioned one report you got this morning, one that was prosecuted, not under sports trafficking, because we don't have the framework yet. How do we use what these two ladies have done through Mission 89 and catalyze the change we need to see? What are the next steps? What do we take from them? And how do we move forward with that?
All right, so that's a very critical question, Simone. And the beautiful thing is that there is already an awakening and awareness within Jamaica. I think it was last year sometime I was invited to address the entire set of sporting associations within football.
Oh, fantastic.
Right. So we had Kingston and St. Andrew Football Association and a number of the coaches and so on from the region. So we're talking about club football, school football, and just people who said, we want to be a part of the solution. We want to ensure that our safeguarding systems are as they should be. Netball Jamaica has reached out. Cricketing Association, the swimming fraternity in terms of aquatic sports. I don't want to say no, because there has been some dialogue through our Ministry of Sport about having a framework for all sporting associations to look at the safeguarding rubric that we have. And so how will this global thematic report help? It certainly serves as a very strong reminder of the need to push forward, the need to have the framework in place so that we can measure, we can protect victims, and we can support persons who are going through different forms of trafficking. And also, I think it really serves as a catalyst to our various sporting associations that they need to have their own protective frameworks, but not just the framework, but we can have a collective dialogue on how we can build out accountability measures within those frameworks. If you're coaching and you sense that something is off, what next? Or if you're a parent and you're observing a situation over a period of weeks that don't seem, as they should be, what's the next step? And how can we then identify very quickly so that we can help prevent and minimize cases?
Yeah, I would love for the stakeholders in the room, if you have any feedback on what you've heard so far. Is there a coach? Do we have any coaches in here?
Yes.
Coaches? Just as to what you've seen, or if you have any questions of the ladies as they've spoken, you can just raise your hands and somebody will come around with a microphone. As we look like down the road and think of what we can do, not just as individual companies and countries and individuals, but how we can pull together. Ladies, I'm going to come back to you to get the way forward from both of you, but we have a question from a stakeholder. Please introduce yourself and go ahead with your question.
Thank you, Simone.
Yes.
Michael Morgan, Chief Technical Director in the Ministry of National Security and Vice Chair of the National Task Force Against Trafficking in Persons. Excellent conversation, quite timely, given our discussion that we had yesterday. And very clear to me now some of the work that we need to do. But I wanted to piggyback on your question on whose responsibility it is. and what are some of the things that we need to do. And certainly, there's a role for us to play as a national task force in pulling together stakeholders, trying to understand more about what the reality is here in Jamaica. We have the Ministry of Education, we have the ONRTIP, we all work in concert. So we first need to understand what our local picture is so that we can help now to build awareness through campaigns, public campaigns, training sessions with our judiciary, with our investigators. We have the JCF anti-trafficking in persons vice squad. We need to make sure that they know exactly what's happening and what to look for. And then that can be filtered down also to educating parents in making sure that their children who are involved in sports, they are aware of these risks and how to help to mitigate them. So just wanted to say that happy I'm here, and I have taken due note, as I'm sure Mrs. Gordon-Harris would have brought it to my attention and pulled me in as required.
I'm sure you're going to be speaking more after this. Thank you very much for your feedback. Anybody else on the floor? Just raise your hand for me. Hi there, Coach. How are you?
I'm good. David Riley, President of the Jamaica Track and Field Coaches Association. I sat here listening and having seen the changes that have been made in terms of the requirements for coaches and licensing, which we're embarking on. I thought about one of the modules that we have to do for our license, and that has to do with safeguarding. And I'm not sure if you are familiar with the content of that course and what the coaches actually have to review in order to pass. And I sat here and I decided I was counting how many times the phrase safeguarding was used. And I've heard it 6 times so far. But from my understanding and my experience, it does not address this issue. It addresses abuse in sports, how you talk to the athlete, grooming, certain things, but it does not address at all this issue of trafficking. And I think that could be where it is included, because that's already a module that everyone has to take, and you must be at least certified safeguarding in order for you to continue to participate as a coach. So I would suggest, as one of the fix, to maybe get involved in that aspect so that it is included. And this is not a locally prepared content. This is the global prepared content. This is what all coaches all over the world has to do. So it's missing from the global conversation, and I don't see anywhere else where it is dealt with, but it could very well fit perfectly in that particular module for coaches to actually make sure, well, bring awareness as well as to cause them to want to participate in the sport, to play their part in making sure that trafficking does not take place in the sport.
I want to come back to you, Coach, with some other questions, but that's a key point. Diane, and then ladies, I would love to get your input on what Coach Riley just said. Yes, Diane.
So, Coach, I was nodding. You were counting how many times we said safeguard. I was nodding consistently as you spoke, because I don't know if you have read the Global Thematic Report, but you have actually captured a sentiment in that report, because it says when the UN, first came up with what the Palermo Protocol would say, it spoke about trafficking generally, but there was no particular focus on perhaps sports trafficking. And so that's why this conversation is so important now, because we realize it has been missing from a lot of the key dialogues in different parts of the global picture. And so that is an excellent point, and certainly beyond today, that's something I'll discuss with my colleagues to see how we can make representation at that level to expand the safeguarding courses that coaches have to take, because that's a critical entry point. Thank you for that.
Ladies online, your thoughts?
I'm happy to go first.
Yes.
Because, I mean, 2 of the questions raised are critical ones. I'm not sure which one to begin with, but I'll maybe the last will be the first. And because we hear this quite a lot, and we face this issue on many occasions of trying to speak with the sport federations, and in particular, we just finalized a FIFA agents ethical recruitment guide for FIFA just a few months ago, and I tell you that they see this issue as a fake agents and agents problem. They don't address it. They don't want it near safeguarding, and even less so the Human Rights Department. So now I want to get to the politics of the issue, because it is a very, very political issue within the sports ecosystem, and it is very, very sensitive. I don't know if we have the time for me to explain to you how that happens and how it's intertwined, but I'll try and make a quick stab at it. So the football pyramid is like this. You've got FIFA at the top, you've got the confederations, CONCACAF, CAF, etc. Then you've got the member associations, and then you've got the clubs, and then you've got the grassroots, the academies, and all these feeders. So a lot of this, the vulnerabilities and the trafficking and all that is happening a lot at the lower levels. You know, the abuse, the exploitation, the trafficking. And so what happens is when these cases are reported to, let's say the club federation, the club CEO, he doesn't want to have anything to do with this, because, you know, probably he has ambitions. He needs money from the member, you know, from the federation. The federation president doesn't want anything to do with this either, because he wants to get voted. Because one, it's probably his club as well, or he knows, you know, the person that's running it, and the clubs are the ones that vote in most countries. The clubs are the ones that vote for the president of that football association.
We see where you're headed with this. We get it. Yeah.
So I stop. Yep. So there's so there's that politics, and so you know, and with FIFA, they have decided this is where they're ready to deal with it. The departments don't speak with each other, and at the end of the day, you know, they need the numbers coming. They need the talent, as many and as fast as possible. Right, so they're not going to vote. What's the turkeys don't vote for Christmas? You know, they're not going to try. They'll try and, you know, they'll superficially address it, but they're not going to. They have no interest in actually tackling this issue. So the approach that Mission 89 is taking now is working at a governmental level. So we, for the past 3 years, we've been at the UN General Assembly. You know, we also had 2 years ago a sport trafficking resolution passed within the UNODC resolution. So we're working at a member state level, so that member states can either include anti-trafficking provisions within their own existing national anti-trafficking frameworks or policies, etc. And law enforcement, you know, we are on the Interpol Human Trafficking Expert Group, and law enforcement by far are the singular stakeholders that have been the most supportive. You know, for them, you know, at the beginning, they were, you know, what would you call it? You know, the sensitization campaigns, I think one was enough for them. Now what they're asking us is, you know, what trainings can we receive? What tools, you know, do you have to help us criminalize this issue?
Gotcha.
You know?
Okay.
So I'll stop there, but it's just to say that it's extremely it's more complex.
Yeah.
And it gets very political very quickly.
It's a heavy lift.
Yes.
It's a huge challenge. If you don't have the buy-in of the people at the top, then what do you really have? So let's see what happens when you go governmental level and see what policy and legislation can do to get the buy-in.
But there's political will.
Yes.
Looks, you know, in Jamaica, just by the assembly that has been brought together now, there is political will. You know, and but that's what moves this issue. And I think Jamaica stands the chance to, to become a leader in this area. I mean, you certainly have the athletes to amplify the message and so forth. So
Jamaica has an opportunity, is what you're saying.
Yes, there's an opportunity. There's a great opportunity,
Doc, let me give you an opportunity to weigh in quickly.
So I don't want to labor on too long, but I just want to also reiterate quite what Lorena has said. We need to really agitate for both at a policy framework level, resource allocation to actually delve into these cases, to investigate these cases, to capacitate individuals. But I also think we need to start developing community-based models of intervention. I think that's where our real driver of change will be, actually at the community level, holding those grassroots clubs, for example, accountable, particularly where there are unregistered academies that do seem to spring up everywhere, wherever we look in the world. So, I mean, I think it has to be a multi-pronged approach. And yes, we do talk about safeguarding, we do talk about a rights-based perspective and so forth, but we need to take it from mere words to real action. Because if we do look at sport, unfortunately, even if we take human trafficking out of the equation, sport has long been a site of abuse and exploitation, particularly of young individuals, and that's one of those factors. We need to understand the power imbalances within sport itself and the types of individuals it also attracts. Unfortunately, there's brilliant coaches, there are brilliant agents and so forth who really, and other people associated with sports teams and so forth, who care for young individuals and talent, but there are also predators within them. So I think capacitating individuals within the sporting environment, organizations, incredibly important, families, young players themselves to also spot the risks themselves. And in turn, we also need adequate reporting mechanisms. I think things also fall short when we take the politics also out of it. Make a great change, but also capacitating with knowledge, resources, and of course data. The more data we have, the greater our ability to actually track, look for those key trends, modus operandi, and basically in turn really focus on those areas that need our consideration and intervention.
All right, thank you, Doc. David, what do you see as far as what we're talking about today? National Rapporteur has mentioned 2 cases. Anecdotally, have you seen or heard within the coaching community anybody talking about seeing any of these trends emerging? Or anything that looks and smells like it could shape up to be that?
I think the definition is what was missing. And now that we have a definition, I think it will help us to be able to spot various cases. Outside of that, it would be difficult to put your finger on it because there are so many ways in which persons can cover things. And we do have, I think the opportunities within track and field are real, and they're not controlled by any one entity or any one person, and therefore it's a much broader gate, an opportunity for people, and that might be what is helping us to not see many cases, because no one can claim to have any real access and therefore can present that access and themselves as the vehicle through which the individual will get the success. So maybe one of the ways to minimize it would to keep it broad, that there are lots of persons, lots of ways in which an individual can progress within the sport, and that will prevent any one person from making any claim that they can help you beyond what the regular person could help you to do. So I think now that we have the definition, it will help us to spot cases and help, because people really need help. Even the abuser needs help. And so, now I think we're in a better situation than before.
And as far as coaching and coaches are concerned, because that's a word, we have a lot of coaches in Jamaica, but I don't know that a lot of them
Yeah, we're solving that too.
And you're talking about safeguarding and the responsibilities,
right.
but...
And we're talking about licensing as well.
Correct.
We're talking about licensing, that you have to be licensed to practice, and the license comes with conditions. You have to renew it every 2 years, and police record involved as well. So
not just self-described, but gone through the rigors, which is a part of the safeguarding, right? Yeah. Okay.
I have a question, though.
Yes.
I heard the statement that it's underreported. You mentioned it.
Yes. Unrecognized and underreported was the phrase Dr. Emsa used.
But the question I have is, who is to report it?
Oh, I can answer that. I can answer that.
And who you report it to?
Okay. So human trafficking, and we're saying that this would be a subset of human trafficking, is exploitation, right? But outside of that specific definition, under our Child Care and Protection Act, if you are making these observations in relation to anyone who is under 18, which of course a child in Jamaica is anyone under 18, you actually have a mandatory obligation to make a report according to Section 6 of the Child Care and Protection Act. And it says that if you are not even sure, but you have a mere suspicion that something could happen in the future, or happened in the past, or is happening right now, there is no further step required by you in making that observation. So we're not asking you to be a gladiator or an investigator to go and verify that it is so. Once you have a mere suspicion, there is a duty to make a report to 211, that's the Office of the Children's Registry, and then when it goes there, it is forwarded on to the relevant entity. And so we have had cases that have been routed to the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Task Force within the JCF from the Children's Registry, because when they look at the characteristics of the report, they say, look, we ask you to take a deeper look because it could be a case of trafficking. So that is the route that you would go for that. If the individual is not a minor, then of course you're called to your regular police station, is something that will start the ball in motion.
That's actually a brilliant question, David, because when I heard the underreported and under-recognized, I thought within the context of sometimes, even domestic violence situations, sometimes you're not sure where to go to, and sometimes you're not sure how seriously they will be taken. So if you suspect or you see something that looks like it fits this mold, where do you go? So you say 211.
Right, if it's
a minor.
And if it's not, then the police station, and they will more than likely refer you on to CTOC, which is the Counterterrorism Organized Crime Branch within our JCF.
CTOC is the agency that deals with this.
Which has the Anti-Trafficking in Persons Task Force.
Copy that.
Vice Squad, sorry.
Okay, so today we're not only telling you what it looks like, but where to go if you see what we've described. Okay, any more questions or comments now? We're opening the floor. Yes.
Good morning.
Hi there.
So I'm Keisha Mighty Brown from the Work Permit Unit, Ministry of Labor and Social Security. Coach spoke about license for persons in the sporting arena. Sometimes we have coaches and sports personnel coming in to practice here in Jamaica or participate in different sporting events. So by virtue of that, they will have to get their work permit or work permit exemptions. Is there any consideration being given for persons coming, expatriates, for them to be licensed as well or get some form of certificate so that that can be a part of the requirements as work permit persons applying for work permits or work permit exemptions to be on the safe side?
That's a brilliant question, and I'm going to throw it to Coach Riley.
Coach
Just
Riley.
Because you mentioned, and this is where my mind is going, because it's a global requirement for all coaches, wouldn't the expatriate coaches already have to have gone through that verification process? I don't know if that would tie in with...
well, there's a big difference between certification and licensing. So they might be certified, so they've gone through the academic requirement to receive a certificate. But the regulations in a local environment for them to practice would require them to have a license to practice in Jamaica. So we want to keep two things separate. And because there are different levels of certification, but regardless of what level of certification you have, you must be licensed to practice.
Okay, so if I might, so perhaps then that would perhaps suggest that there is an opportunity for the work permit unit to consider adding that as an additional criterion for having the person here, right? Just like with medical doctors, you have to be a registered medical practitioner here, despite your years of experience elsewhere, right? I saw a senator coming in.
Thanks, Keisha. Appreciate
And
it.
if I may also just add to that, I mean, I think there should be some enhanced vetting of these international recruitment coaches or agents, scouts. It's almost as if they should have a higher level
threshold
of criteria. Yes.
To higher threshold to prove themselves if they're coming from outside of Jamaica.
Correct.
Okay. Yes, we agree. There are 2 more hands I saw here. Actually, 1, 2, 3 more hands. Coach, can you just pass the microphone in front of you?
Right. Good morning.
Hi
So
there.
I am not a senator. Yes, I am, yes. So it happens to me all the time. Even in the airport overseas, I go to the diplomatic line because they say I'm a senator.
Speaking
so
it into being.
So I am, I am actually Victor Barrett, acting senior superintendent of police attached to the counterterrorism and organized crime investigation branch.
Good to have you.
But I welcome designation senator. Right, so the conversation is timely, and I think it's a step in the right direction. So from us at CTALK, we are thinking, we are going a bit further with the conversation. So I think we need to sensitize our immigration officers, or marine officers. So for example, the conversation about trafficking through sports and around sports. So when you see a yacht in our waters with a white man and some young boys or some girls, who monitors that yacht? There also has to be, a link with our Caribbean partners. So if that yacht escape us, goes to Barbados, there need to be conversation. So they can be trafficking through using sporting events with their big yachts, their planes. So who are monitoring those individuals? So we are saying that the emphasis should also be placed on, our marine police, the JDF Coast Guard, and the fact that we need to have effective collaboration with our partners and coordination with CARICOM Impacts, so RSS. So that's for me. But,
what's RSS?
Regional Security Service.
Gotcha. Okay.
So it's a step in the right direction, and we at CTALK, we play a role, and we continue to play a role.
Thank you for that. Mrs. Gordon-Harris, you have a whole heap of homework today.
Yeah.
It's a lot of work to do.
Right. But this is excellent, and it goes back to the point I made earlier. The consciousness is not just awakening.
Yes.
There has been an appetite that there is a potential risk, and so we're seeking to galvanize and build on that. So CTALK, thank you for always being innovative in how you seek to do your law enforcement responsibilities.
I think we have 3 more questions, and we're going to get closing comments from the ladies online, and then we're going to close with Mrs. Gordon-Harrison. Yes. Introduce yourself and go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning. Anna J. Roberts, manager of the Ananda Alert Secretariat dealing with missing children, representing the Child Protection and Family Services Agency. This has been a wonderful discussion. Happy to be a part of it. And listening, our takeaway at this time is to really look at how we educate our parents, how we educate our children, or school officials, and as you know, anyone that works with children, they're expected to have a duty of care towards children, so they're treated as prescribed persons. So how we educate those persons, educate those children, how to identify these modes of exploitation. And of course, because we operate the 211 child abuse hotline that you mentioned, Mrs. Harrison, it's also to make sure that us on the receiving end, the persons that are receiving the reports, that we are also able to identify the different areas that you mentioned, the trafficking in, around, or through sports, so that we can, as we get the information, we are able to send them over to OCA as a prescribed person, because the perpetrator is a prescribed person, or to the anti-trafficking unit as well. So it has been a good discussion, and we of course have a lot of takeaway. from this morning.
Thank you. And thank you for the work that you guys do. Very important work. 2 more hands over here. Or was it 3? 3 more, and then we're through. Yes.
All right, so I just wanted to make 3 quick points just to manage the risk of any anxiety that might not be warranted, right? So our anti-trafficking framework is very robust. So I wanted to start with that, right? We have dedicated units, and this is an example of it working. What is important, and the last comment summed it up nicely, is the awareness component, because trafficking comes in all different kinds of forms. So if we were to identify a case of trafficking in sports or through sports now, the framework would allow prosecution for it. But the work that has to be done is packaging the awareness in a way so that it can be...
for prosecution now is possible?
Absolutely.
Today?
It might not, you wouldn't call it in sports, but it would be trafficking.
Yeah. Yes,
right?
okay. Okay.
So the other point I want to make is that our ministry is intending to implement a visa policy. And in our visa policy, it contemplates traveling arrangements for sports, students who would like to come here and vice versa. So it's very important that we're having this discussion now, because we can use this mechanism to tighten the regulation. So the visa regime, the work permit arrangements, and whatever other requirements we might want to stipulate for coaches and other practitioners who participate. But I think the biggest thing that we need to do is to build awareness, is to make people understand what all forms of trafficking look like, what does trafficking in sports, through sports look like, so that they can spot it and the referrals can happen. That's the first major step that we need to make. So I just wanted to say those 3 quick points.
Thank you very much there, sir. Final one here, and then the last one in back, and then we go to closing comments.
Richard Troop, Director, Safety and Security in Schools Unit at the Ministry of Education, Skills, Youth and Information. I too, on behalf of the ministry, would like to congratulate Diane for your excellent work and the timeliness of this particular conversation. Indeed, Jamaica is a powerhouse when it comes on to sports of all shape and forms. And the sporting industry is a very fertile ground for trafficking to take place. And so easily I see major partnerships happening, Dan. The need for our training of our coaches, the need for us to review how we screen persons who express an interest to make themselves available to support our nation's children. How do we engage students themselves who are athletes to be aware of the red flags so that they can communicate the same? As a ministry, we also have a policy document, a protocol that's treated with contact sports. You know, it is long overdue to be reviewed, and certainly this is an opportunity to ensure that we are reflecting this subject matter in this document. The ease at which, and there are so many things to take for granted, because when I was a child, walkathon sheet was something that was a big thing for us in inner city communities. But the ease at which even a simple walkathon sheet can be used to promote child labor and begging and things like that. And so there are also some cultural issues around sports that we also need to interrogate and have a conversation around to determine that its popularity is not necessarily one that should be seen as it is okay. And what is it about us and how we administer sport and engage in sport that we need to revisit? The ease at which coaches can come to Kingston with athletes and put them up in a particular facility because of the cost to get a proper facility. So there's a lot of unpacking to do, and certainly this is an excellent opportunity to start that unpacking with a commitment to change by working together. Thank you very much.
Fantastic point.
Thank you. If I could just jump in really quickly, just listening about the coaches accommodating students, we've had reports of coaches saying, look, you have to stay at this house on a farm because we need to practice for the entire summer, right? Where are the parents? what's the overarching protective structure, and so on. So there's a lot of work to be done. Yes.
All right. Then how did that just happen, so?
Well, parents are eager. You see, that's the thing, you know, Simone. Sports is not just enjoyment. It's an emotional desire to do well.
And a vehicle
and so for improvement in terms of educational access, if you get a scholarship and earning. And so there is this desire and great yearning for athletes who want to do well and their parents who want to support them in that journey. So of course, if coach is showing an interest in you and wants to train and you live in a camp where this is what you're doing, you get up and you sleep there and so on, it's going to give you the edge over the others.
Yikes. Okay, one more, and then I say one last
and
hand on.
Dare I say, if I may also interject again, you know, so often parents wanted more than the athletes themselves in many occasions.
Vicarious, some vicarious accomplishment there. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Lydin Campbell. I am the principal for St. Anne Preparatory School. Thank you so much for the invite. As I listen to you, I really believe that it is very important for us to educate, and we have to start very early. And I believe that it is very important. I was thinking of safety and security, that this is really, you know, permanent or dominant in the education system. And so as we look at safety and security, I think this is one way in which we can, you know, we can start. Very important, start with the parents. We need to have more of a relationship with our children. Let them know that it's okay for them to come and to tell us if there is something that they feel like, you know, if they're uncomfortable. We as parents need to be sitting and having more conversation with our children. And I think a very good place, a very good thing that we can do in order to get the information out there is to partner with our schools. You know, have more forums like these where we are inviting key stakeholders. You know, as we go into the new term, it is a good way to have the conversation and to get information out there.
Thank you, Madam Principal. Final comment?
Thank you for allowing me final comment.
I feel gracious today.
Carl Berry is the name. I'm a police officer in the JCF. But I stand here really as the founding member of the Interpol Expert Working Group on Human Trafficking. And one of the focus that we place at the working group level is on sport. And if I may be allowed to just read this briefly. Traffickers exploit both children and adults, taking advantage of the high stakes and intense pressures within the sporting world. Young athletes, particularly those from the global south, that would include us, are at the heart of the thriving industry, driven by the dreams of successful careers in sport. Now, I drive you quickly to the case of Rex versus Ricketts, a young enough man claiming to be a coach. So we know we have licensed coaches and we have different types, but we do have coaches that still coach. So he approached some students, 10 of them actually, and he gave them paperwork to give to their parents to have them sign, allowing the kids to be a part of his summer camp. And the rest and the next is history. He was fortunately arrested after one of the children called the parent, having suspected him to be doing some things I won't say. But he has been convicted for human trafficking of those 10 young boys from high school in Kingston, Jamaica. Coaches, please get some information. It's available. Mr. Barrett is there, trafficking in person. It's all over the place. But I urge you at the localized level from your school, just tell us and let us come and educate you and the others. I could go on, but I know time is of essence.
So where do we find that kind of information, like the case you just mentioned?
It is on the, well, it was a localized case done. but it's available if you were to touch base with the Trafficking in Person unit.
Okay.
I'll make it available to you, Mr. Gordon Harrison. You could put it on the website so that they can access it through OC and other frameworks. But it was...
What year was that, you say?
The year of the incident?
Yes.
I'd have to drill a little deeper.
Okay.
But it was pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID?
Yes, not far pre-COVID though.
So this is before it was on your radar?
Yes, we could put that along with the Kurt Allen case, the 2017 case. That
absolutely.
Yes.
Right. Wow. Okay. See, this is what happens when we talk, right? We get to share. Thank you very much. Okay, ladies, online, let's get our closing comments from you, and then we have the National Rapporteur put a lid on this for us today. Coming out of our discussions today, you've heard the feedback, you've heard the coaches speak, you've heard general comments. What are your thoughts on how we move? You've done this groundbreaking research. What are the next steps for us to now start to chip away meaningfully at what's going on? Lorena, let me start with you.
Thank you. I think based on what I've heard, it sounds like you do have a very robust anti-trafficking legislation and framework as well, and indeed reporting mechanisms. And so perhaps the starting point would be at a prevention, taking prevention actions, being the sensitization campaigns, awareness, also education, athlete or youth education, parents education, that will be key. But that should also go in parallel, I believe, with the advocacy actions as well. And that would immediately look like, working on those sport specific amendments to your existing trafficking legislation, if it's comprehensive, or if you want to, go high and I know Jamaica is very ambitious. Perhaps then you could establish for the first ever sport trafficking legislation, that's exclusive to protecting athletes from abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. I think that there is the possibility for Jamaica to showcase, this pioneering work. I mean, you already have the legislative frameworks as mentioned, and maybe move forward to implementation models as well. And perhaps in a year or so, once some of these advocacy actions have taken place, we could also look to bring the first ever global sports trafficking conference to Jamaica as well, because I know we're
speak it into being, Lorena. Give Mrs. Gordon Harrison some more work to do. But I mean, why not Jamaica, right? Because of who we are, why not Jamaica? I had a former CEO with whom I worked who always says, never waste a crisis, right? And if we see one developing, then there's opportunity in it. So thank you very much, Lorena. Dr. Emsa, your closing comments?
So I'd like to say I'm just blown away by how proactive everybody is. I think, you're taking the right approach, looking at the problem head on. People's attitudes towards this problem as well is quite remarkable in terms of looking for the solutions, how we can also incorporate it into, whether it's at a coaching level, at a club level, within education, for example, within law enforcement and so forth. So I think, you already are, on the right track, which is fundamental in terms of this, recognizing the problem, being willing to talk about it, being willing to act against it. And I also just want to reiterate what Lorena said, essentially, looking in terms of the national policy framework, for example, incorporating that into that, so you have formal directives and guidelines, how to address this issue at various levels, both in terms of the grassroots level, domestic, and also from different departmental levels, and also looking at jurisdictional cooperation, multi-jurisdictional cooperation as well. I think that becomes very important, because more often than not, we work in silos. That's sometimes our biggest problem, and we don't communicate with one another. And that's why we often miss some of the key issues that are occurring and what we're seeing in some of the patterns there. So I think if we can all work together, those of us already working within trafficking, we've been sensitized to it, and now looking more in terms of how this plays out in sport trafficking. Because in terms of also other emerging forms of trafficking that we're seeing, I think there's also a lot of issues that will arise where sport will also be used to traffic individuals into crime, particularly into cybercrime. So we need to be aware of those emerging issues as well, and not what's also just playing, on the sports field. So I think, it really takes us into that realm where we start looking at where the threats lie, where the weaknesses lie, and where the gaps are in terms of our governance structures, our legislation, policy frameworks, and how we can tighten those up. But I think the best bet for all of us is working together, both from a top-down approach, but also from a grassroots level up. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're in different places across the world, but the issue is common to us. Ladies, we want to thank you for the groundbreaking research that you have done to help us start this conversation in such a meaningful way and to have it today. And also thank you for your time. I mean, what time is it in South Africa now? What time is it in Switzerland now?
Just after 7.
7:11.
Oh,
Yeah.
so near bedtime. So we've released you just in time. Thank you for your time today, ladies, and for being a part of this absolutely very meaningful conversation. Diana, I always have to lift my hat to you for the work that you do in both your capacities, because this is how we move the needle, and we talk sometimes and nothing happens. That doesn't happen in your office. What happens out of this? So much to assimilate and pull together, but what do we do next?
All right, so certain key things have already arisen, certainly in my mind. CTD, we can have a conversation about whether we can do one more amendment to perhaps think about incorporating sports trafficking specifically in our legislation so that we can have that legal framework. Certainly at the level of the Ministry of Gender, Sport, Entertainment, and Culture. I think I said that wrong, but you know which ministry I'm talking about.
Culture, Gender, Entertainment.
Right.
Culture, Gender, Entertainment, Sport.
Right. We can look at having a national framework that speaks about what all sporting disciplines, associations, clubs need to be ascribing towards, because when you have aquatics association having and netball having and cricket having, but they're not saying the same thing, it means that we're going to have a problem with oversight and really just having a fully protective environment for all our athletes. So I think we need to be looking at uniformity and accountability at the highest level. And we cannot leave out, and everybody has said it, building the preventative arm through awareness, education, sensitization. And for me, that's in 3 parts. At the home level, with parents, so they know what to look out for, and they are empowered to speak to their children who have dreams and aspirations, that all that glitters is not gold, whether it's locally or the prospect of going overseas, or you're not trafficked here, but you get overseas, the possibility is still rife within the foreign territory. And that, of course, would incorporate the schools being a very critical part of that sensitization. Then there's the education at the community level. Have our grassroots, six-a-side, scrimmage, and all of that, understand that this is bigger than just six-a-side. And when you build awareness at the community level, community members can say what they're seeing perhaps every Sunday for the last 3 months. And then there is the formal education, and I think of our sporting professionals or coaches, for example, who have to do particular certification, whether at GC, Foster, or otherwise, but building in this component within the curriculum that our coaches have to be exposed to before they're even coaches. So we're building it in a proactive way so they know what they're going out into once they are certified and they're operating in the sporting arena.
Are you hopeful?
I'm
Are you
very
excited
hopeful.
coming out of this conversation today?
Very hopeful, very excited, because the passion of all the persons who have spoken, whether government, non-government, school, education, ministry, coach, I see the passion, and for me, passion drives action.
That's right.
And so we are going to be very galvanized out of this conversation, and see how we can drill down to brass tacks.
Multi-sector, multi-stakeholder,
yes.
because this silo thing that Doc mentioned is a real thing, and as long as we continue to operate in silos, failure is a, that's what definitely we're at, guaranteed outcome. Yes. And so thank you for convening this and for doing this and for putting us ahead of the game. It's emerging, but we are talking today about it so that it don't emerge and become like a, right? And that's where the education comes in through the conversation. I will just give you the opportunity to say thank you to the folks who are here and the folks who are online, please.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Monique and Lorena, I am more than thrilled to have had you a part of this. In Monique's bio, and I smiled when I realized she had that she's a member of the G100 Women's Wing. So is Lorena, and so am I. Excellent. So that's a great commonality that has brought this work to light. So I want to thank you for your time and for riding the time difference issues with us. To all of our viewers online, because we are streaming live, thank you for your interest and for your participation by listening and absorbing. And of course, to all of you who journeyed, I mean, it's a beautiful property, but it's very far. Thank you so much.
I would say far.
Yes.
In Jamaica, we say far.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you so
far
much.
At Montego Bay.
Yes. So thank you so much for taking the journey and for being here, and for me it demonstrates the interest that you have in this issue. And I really want to commend you for your dedication and to say that the reward for good work is more work. So we'll still be knocking at your door. And I know I did it at the start in the welcome, but my team, ONRTIP, is here, very small team, and the two reps that are here, I'm going to ask you to stand and to be recognized. Christina, who is already standing, and Colleen. Thank you so much for all that you have done to really respond. I mean, I think on Tuesday I was messaging Colleen at minutes to 1 in the morning, and she was responding, and it has just been continuous, and the support is great. And of course, our sister organization, Office of the Children's Advocate, there are some representatives here. I want to thank you for taking the journey, because it is partnership always that makes the dream work. So thank you.
Partnership, though, needs great leadership. So can we have a round of applause for our National Rapporteur and our Children's Advocate? Lady work hard, but as an immaculate old girl, what can I tell you? That's what we do. That is what we do. Thank you, folks, for being here today. I want to underscore what Diane says, for tuning in today and for being here in person. And we also commit, I also commit to the cause. If you need us in any way, awareness is our business. And if it benefits our children and our young people and our nation, then SimSpeak is in it. If you folks want to find out more about what's going on, we have some social media handles that we're going to put up. Please follow ONRTIP so you can be abreast of what is happening in their space on their different platforms. Office of the Children's Advocate is also there if you want to go on and find out what they are doing. And folks, let's all just be on the alert so we can all make a difference. Thank you for joining us today from this beautiful, beautiful property. A drive to Kingston is now in the card, so we brace our minds for that and we head on in. I'm Simone Clark Cooper. Thank you very much for watching today, and take care, everybody. Thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, we invite you for lunch, which is happening next door.